Welcome back. I'm Dean Sprague from Melbourne Chefs, and I'm here today with Ben Mack. Now, Ben Mack is a very familiar face around the festival, having done demonstrations over the last couple of years. And of course, Ben is an extremely well accomplished chef, super normal, top paddock, to name a few, but also the founder of the Social Food Project and the co-founder of We Eat Local. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So how has the pandemic changed things for you, or what has changed for you in the last 12 months, Ben?
Well, quite a lot actually. We kind of, at the beginning of the year, we were looking pretty good. You know, we're our small little catering and events business, the Social Food Project, just turned 5. Starting to get some regular contracts and regular clients and building something that looked like a viable business. Unfortunately, all of that was sort of swept away. We had a whole stack of contracts which kind of just disappeared overnight, unfortunately. We sort of pivoted quite quickly and started doing takeaway and delivery. But because we don't have a premises, we tried to do things a little bit differently. We ended up doing these sort of bulk braises and salads that you can buy in reusable, returnable 6-portion boxes. So the idea was kind of like bulk food for the week. You could get a beautiful, you know, braised lamb shoulder with all the trims, and then a nice kind of grain salad with veggies and that. And the idea is you could put it together. But I mean, if I'm being honest, it kind of just made financial sense. It only just kind of broke even. It paid for a couple of staff members, which is always positive. But it wasn't a viable thing for us to continue long term. And so now we're sort of deciding what we want to do from here. I've kind of moved away from Melbourne. Now I live in London. And so my business partner is still on the ground in Melbourne. That has made it a little bit difficult, you know, being split and of course with COVID, but we're still deciding what exactly we want to do. But yeah.
So you moved to London late last year, is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, so 12 months ago, moved over, made the big...
I understand you're studying a Masters of Food Policy at the University of London. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like an interesting pathway, and certainly a natural pathway for you. So I guess my first question is, what have you learnt since you've started that degree?
I mean, a lot. Yeah. So the Masters in Food Policy from City University of London is a fantastic master's program for anyone who's interested in, I guess, food policy. And I mean, so what is food policy? It's really the study of who eats, when and how. And it's really thinking about the different actors in the food system, from companies, governments, civil society, and how they all kind of vie and compete or negotiate what good food policy looks like based on their interests. It's quite an interesting field. I mean, food policy hasn't necessarily had a sort of a home or a department like a lot of other sort of trade or environment or nutrition. But it works across all of these domains, all of these areas. Yes, exactly. And it really tries to bring these areas together in a cohesive way to say, you know, how do we produce food? How do we consume food in a way that's good for us, good for the planet? And
yeah, exactly. And multiple levels within each of those components, multiple levels of complexity.
Yeah, exactly. So it's been a fantastic course. I'd highly recommend anyone to check it out. I think they're actually doing an online version of the program this year as well. So it's, yeah, fantastic. The teaching staff are absolutely amazing. Some of the best kind of world thinkers in this space are teaching there. So it's a real privilege.
Fantastic. Well, it seems like you're making not only an impact on the world, but on the City of London. So I understand that your organisation, We Eat Local, was entered into, now is it the City Lights, or what's the name of the City of London Sustainability Awards that are currently running? City Lights?
I think you're talking about City Spark. Are you talking about?
City Spark, of course. Yeah.
So City Spark is actually through the university as well, and they had a business competition, which we entered for We Local, which is I'm a co-founder of another small business back in Melbourne. And essentially, what we try to do is we work with local food businesses, so producers, artisans, restaurants, and retail outlets, and say, how can we support them and connect them to ethical eaters, essentially, to people who want to spend money to support their local food system, because they know that it has all these benefits. It's fresher, it's more delicious, often it's more environmentally sound. You get to support rural communities. And so our challenge and what we're trying to do is think about what creative ways we can employ through campaigns and through technology to bring these two groups together, essentially.
And that sort of model can be applied anywhere in the world, virtually, wherever food is grown, which is hopefully a lot more of the planet, but wherever food is grown in those communities and directly talking to the people that are consuming. So incredible. And of course, when you throw in the factors of sustainable farming or agriculture, ethical practices, UN sustainability principles, there's certainly a lot more out there for we as consumers, and you're connecting those dots there. And what an incredible thing!
Yeah, and I mean it's a particular challenge. So, there's like a fact here based in the UK, and so in 1950 there were 160,000 family farms, and in 2015 that was down to 38,000.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the smaller, family level food producers are being kind of pushed out by larger corporations and agribusiness, and it's becoming a real problem. We see all of the negative impacts of industrialized food systems for habitat, for climate, for COVID. There's pretty clear links now that that demonstrate that industrial agriculture is a source of some of these big diseases. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of Rob Wallace, but wrote an amazing book called Big Farms Make Big Flu, which is in 2016, and sort of outlined exactly how agribusiness, livestock production can be this sort of breeding ground for pathogens, and unfortunately, that science is pretty clear, and unfortunately, the sort of agricultural system and the food system doesn't necessarily think to address those challenges, and sort of pushes that back onto public health as their responsibility.
Yes.
So hopefully we can see a shift after this, maybe this global shake-up, we'll see some better policy coming through.
Well, one of the things that we're seeing a lot more of is those farmers with those ethical sustainability principles in place, and really doubling down on what they produce and caring about it in a multitude of ways, living with the animals, living with the produce, and more. What we're seeing is a lot better farming from small scale farmers.
Mm-hmm.
Where would you see,
definitely.
I guess, hearing that there's less than a ninth of what the original farming community was in the UK, I'm sure that's going across the board into Europe. Where do you see the future of farming and agriculture, and how it can relate back into the community? I know it's a big question, but huge question. I mean, it relates to soil health, availability of water, availability of labourers. So there's economics as well as people power in there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a farmer and I'm not a natural scientist, but I'm a chef. I'm a chef, like cooking good food for good people, really. But so I'm probably not the best person to answer. But I mean, what I do see is that diversity, biological diversity, cultural diversity, social diversity is really the thing that's going to create resilience, and really that's the touchstone for the future, I think. is you know, how can we create diverse and resilient food systems locally, but also, you know, connected internationally, supported by government, supported by business, civil society, everyone that are working together in a way that's cohesive and integrated, you know.
Yes, absolutely.
That's what I say.
And I mean, the way I see it, it's you're definitely working towards being part of this. One of the potential solutions for our food future. And where would you see yourself in 10 years, 20 years?
I'm not sure exactly. Who knows? Does anyone really know what they're going to end up doing?
Well, if this year's got anything to go by, don't make any plans. But where would you like to be in 10, 20 years?
Well, so I mean, I guess my recent sort of interest in, I guess, which direction that I would love to continue heading is through the research that I did with my master's program, so through the dissertation. And we're exploring this really interesting concept of policy coherence. And essentially, it's the idea is that when we work in these sorts of complex systems, all of these different actors and organizations may inadvertently be supporting each other or undermining each other. I've written a couple of really great articles about this notion of coherence. And an example could be if you look at trade policy versus nutrition policy. So trade policy can be really beneficial to nutrition in a way that it can help lower the cost of nutritious food for people to eat and improve access. So that could be said it's a coherent set of policies. But at the same time, trade liberalization might encourage particular highly processed foods or high salt, sugar, fat foods to be brought in, which then might contribute to the obesity epidemic, which in turn would undermine the goals of nutrition. And so the dissertation that I did was looking at this idea of coherence, but within a hospitality setting. And so essentially the question that I asked was how do sustainable restaurants contribute to or undermine the sustainable diets agenda? And so this idea about sustainable diets it's one way that you can frame this conversation, and looks at not just the environmental or economic or social, but also digs into things like quality, into governance, into some of these social values, cultural appropriateness, identity, preference, and some of these kind of more nuanced issues of food. And so we use this really great framework, which was developed by Tim Lang and Pamela Mason, called the Sustainable Diets Framework. And they had 40 goals of what makes up this idea of a sustainable diet. And so the research looked at how many of these goals sustainable restaurants in the UK were contributing to, or in fact, inadvertently undermining through their actions. And yeah, I mean, it was a really interesting study. There was a couple of key findings. So a couple of them were there seems to be a clear gap between values and actions. And so very consistently across the board is that restaurants would highly value a particular goal, but we're not that good at delivering those goals on the ground.
What would you think that is? Like, you've worked in hospitality for a while. Where do you see that shortcoming?
Well, yeah, I mean, it implies that there's a range of barriers to implementation. So at least what it does show is that people care about this stuff. People can be aware of it, but there's barriers. So the barriers could be financial. They might not be able to afford particular technologies or procedures or the sort. The second is expertise.
Yes.
And so, you know, chefs and hospitality professionals they're not necessarily trained in sustainability. They're not experts in the space. And they've got so many other things going on at the same time that it's no surprise that they can't commit the time and the resources to really dig into this stuff. But that's another whole research project is to understand the motivations and abilities and barriers to this sort of stuff.
Well, it's interesting that you said that, Ben. Now, I love Formula One as a sport to watch, but the recent winner, now, I don't know why his name escapes me, but he's setting up a foundation on exploring why people of colour can't get into particular roles within motorsport. Now, taking away that motorsport aspect and applying it to hospitality settings, do you feel that there's a gap in the training of chefs in relation to sustainability? Should it be something that is brought into training, at least a couple of units?
Yeah, definitely. And so through the research, I've looked at some reviews, some systematic literature reviews that looked at British universities teaching hospitality and how many of them had sort of standalone sustainability units, and it was only something like 15% had any kind of meaningful sustainability module included in the program. And there was a lot of different approaches to the issue. So it might be sustainability management, it might be sustainable procurement, and very few of them took a holistic approach. One of the things that I did find both from an educational perspective and in restaurants is that most of this stuff is led from managers, and it's led from managers' own personal value sets. And so where universities did a good job of communicating sustainability, it was most frequently led by individuals who thought it was important to address this stuff and pushed it into the curriculum themselves.
Wow. Well, that's encouraging, not only for people to say, hey, I've noticed we're doing something wrong. This is a couple of ways we can deal with that. So it's literally on the ground. It's what I find astounding is the fact that that's where it's coming from, as opposed to policy. So why can't government sort of think about this stuff? Where do you see the barriers in government's thinking?
Yeah, so I mean, it comes back to this idea about coherence, as I was talking about earlier, is that, you know, governments are these massive, multifaceted, you know, beasts that have many competing interests and many different obligations to themselves, to businesses, to civil society. And I guess one of the key kind of teachings from this master's program is that if you can find the places in which the goals and actions align, and you can say, actually, you know what, this sort of trade policy is going to be great for nutrition as well as for the environment, then that's where you apply the pressure and you get some really good results that way.
Well, that makes me think about what governments around that are actually implementing, or at least trying to get these goals in place. Who's out there? Who's getting it right?
Yeah. So I mean, I'm a little bit biased, but the London food strategy is really great. It's a great example of integrated food policy that looks at the economics, looks at the environment, looks at health. It looks at the most vulnerable people within society and how they can be supported, and it approaches it from this really systemic and integrated approach to the issues. So Scandinavia typically do quite well. Canada's really great for food policy. Australia is pretty crap, to be honest. Got a long sort of winded history of failed attempts at food policy, unfortunately. But you know, there's room to grow.
There's hope yet, absolutely. Well, yeah. I guess I would like to sort of close off. I've absolutely loved this chat, Ben. I see the work that you're doing, not only now but into the future, it's critical. It's part of the Earth's survival, and whatever the big shake-up this year has been about on ground zero level. We're all at ground zero now. We need to rebuild the future. We need to think about the future differently than
Yeah, definitely.
the past. And you're part of that future. And yeah, I'm absolutely awed and a huge fan, by the way, Ben.
Likewise, man. We've been mates for a while now, so it's great to watch your progress and with your coffee work. It's fantastic. So
it's all about the
keep up
coffee. It's all that magic bean.
the magic bean. Absolutely.
All right, Ben. Thank you so much. And to find out more about what Ben does, especially with the programs of We Eat Local, social food projects, or even just to take a peek into the window of Ben's food mind, have a look at the links below and find out some more for yourself.
Awesome. Thanks,
Thank you,
mate. Nice
Ben.
chat.